The autumn chill of Emmerdale, usually a comforting embrace, felt like a shroud on this fateful Monday, October 13, 2025. A pervasive unease hung in the air, a silent prelude to the storm that was brewing beneath the idyllic facade of the village. The events of the past weeks had left scars, visible and invisible, on the lives of many, but none more so than on the fragile psyche of April Windsor and the burgeoning desperation of Dylan Penders. The puppet master, Celia Daniels, a woman whose innocuous appearance belied a heart of ice and a mind sharper than any blade, continued to orchestrate her dark symphony, each note a calculated step towards expanding her illicit drug empire. Her adopted son, Ray Walters, once a street-hardened youth, now a polished but deeply manipulated lieutenant, moved through the village with a deceptive charm, a constant shadow to Celia's unseen hand. The previous week's confrontation, a pivotal and terrifying moment for April, had ripped away any lingering illusions about Ray's true nature. She had seen the raw, unadulterated power that Celia wielded, and the chilling subservience of Ray. The realization had struck her with the force of a physical blow. Ray was not her protector, but merely another pawn, albeit a more privileged one, in Celia's cruel game. His seemingly genuine concern for April and Dylan was nothing more than a carefully constructed performance, designed to lull them into a false sense of security, to deepen their perceived debt, and ultimately, to tighten the invisible chains that bound them. This morning, the tension was palpable at the Dales haulage depot. Dylan, still buzzing with a mixture of pride and apprehension from finally passing his driving test, felt the weight of Ray's recent generosity pressing down on him. The intensive driving course, paid for by Ray, was not a gift, but an investment, a chilling reminder of the ever-growing ledger of his indebtedness. Ray, with a predatory glint in his eyes that belied his smooth smile, had made it abundantly clear. The debt was escalating, and Dylan's new license was merely a tool for its accelerated repayment. The depot, a hub of legitimate commerce, was to become a clandestine artery for Celia's nationwide drug distribution. Dylan's heart pounded with a sickening rhythm as Ray approached him, a casual arm slung over his shoulder, a gesture that felt less like camaraderie and more like ownership. "Well done, lad," Ray drawled, his voice a low, silken thread. "Now, about that trip to Hull-Fragile. A little detour might be in order. A small package, nothing for you to worry your pretty head about." The small package was, of course, a shipment of drugs, intended to be tucked away amidst Jai Sharma's legitimate deliveries. Dylan's stomach churned, a bitter taste rising in his throat. He had envisioned his driving test as a gateway to freedom, a chance to carve out his own path, but it had only served to ensnare him further in Celia's web. However, a sudden twist of fate, a momentary reprieve from the tightening noose, arrived in the form of Jai. "Bad news, Dylan," Jai announced, a frown etched on his face as he consulted his clipboard. "Looks like you won't be driving to Hull after all. Billy's going instead. You'll just be accompanying him." A wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled Dylan's knees, washed over him. He met Ray's gaze, a flicker of defiance, quickly suppressed, in his own. Ray's smile tightened, his eyes narrowing imperceptibly. The plan had hit a snag, but Celia's network was nothing if not adaptable. Meanwhile, in another corner of Emmerdale, April Windsor found herself increasingly isolated, the weight of her own debt to Ray pressing down on her. Celia, ever the strategist, was growing impatient. "April needs to pull her weight," Ray conveyed, relaying Celia's chilling directive. And so, a new assignment was thrust upon April. Liverpool. The very name of the city, vibrant and distant, seemed to mock her desperate desire for escape. April's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and a desperate search for an alternative. Transporting drugs was a line she was absolutely unwilling to cross, a moral boundary she clung to with fierce resolve. A desperate plan, born of panic and a dwindling hope, began to form in her mind: Rona's jewelry. A fleeting, dangerous thought, a desperate gamble to secure the money she needed, to sever the invisible chains without becoming an active participant in Celia's horrific enterprise. She knew it was wrong, knew the betrayal it would represent, but the suffocating pressure of her situation was driving her to the brink. With trembling hands, April crept towards Rona's bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sent jolts of fear through her. She envisioned the glint of the jewelry, a tangible path to freedom, a way to reclaim her life. But as her fingers brushed against the cool metal of a necklace, a voice, sharp and disbelieving, sliced through the silence. "April? What on earth are you doing?" Rona stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock and hurt, the nascent betrayal already etched on her face. The moment of truth, a raw and agonizing confrontation, had arrived. April's carefully constructed plan crumbled, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. The desperate gamble had failed. With no other options, no other avenues of escape, April swallowed the bitter pill of defeat. She sought out Ray, her voice barely a whisper as she reluctantly agreed to the Liverpool job. "I'll do it," she mumbled, the words feeling like poison on her tongue. But Ray, ever the cold manipulator, merely offered a cruel smile. "Too late, April," he replied, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Someone else has already been sent." The words hung in the air, a cruel mockery of her desperation, a stark reminder of her powerlessness. Celia's network was a machine, efficient and unforgiving, with interchangeable parts. April had hesitated, and the machine had moved on. Yet, Ray wasn't finished. "But I have another task for you," he continued, his eyes glinting with a chilling anticipation. "One far darker than you could have imagined." The ominous words sent a shiver down April's spine, a premonition of something truly terrible. The Liverpool job, as terrifying as it had seemed, now felt like a walk in the park compared to the unknown horror that awaited her. The late afternoon sun cast long, ominous shadows as Ray drove April away from the familiar, if now tainted, comfort of Emmerdale. The landscape blurred past the window, each mile taking her further from home and deeper into a suffocating vortex of fear. The silence in the car was heavy, punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the frantic pounding of April's heart. Her mind raced, grappling with the chilling implication of Ray's words, "Far darker than you could have imagined." What could be worse than transporting drugs? The answer, when it came, was a visceral punch to the gut. Ray finally pulled up to a discreet, anonymous hotel on the outskirts of a bustling town, its brick facade and darkened windows offering no comfort, only a sense of foreboding. He turned to April, a small, innocent-looking packet in his hand. "Cocaine. This is for a valuable client," he explained, his voice disturbingly calm, devoid of any empathy for the terror growing in April's eyes. "Take it inside. Room 302. And here," he added, pushing a small bottle of vodka towards her, "have a drink. To relax." April's hands trembled as she took the packet, her mind screaming in protest. This wasn't about transporting, this was about delivery, about direct involvement, about a proximity to the illicit world she had desperately tried to avoid. The vodka, attempting oblivion, felt like a serpent's offer. She knew, instinctively, that it was a trap, a way to dull her senses, to make her more compliant, more vulnerable. But the fear, the overwhelming sense of powerlessness, was a potent persuader. She took a tentative sip, the burning liquid doing little to quell the icy dread spreading through her veins. Inside the sterile, impersonal hotel room, April paced, each minute stretching into an eternity. The packet of cocaine felt heavy, a burden of guilt and fear. The vodka bottle, half empty, stood on the bedside table, a silent testament to her creeping desperation. The knock on the door, when it finally came, was a jolt that sent a tremor through her. Her breath hitched in her throat. This was it. The client, a man named Tim, was a picture of deceptive normalcy. Middle-aged, dressed in business casual, he offered a polite smile that did little to ease April's growing apprehension. He took the drugs, a swift, practiced exchange that spoke of a familiarity with such transactions. "Thanks, April," he said, his eyes lingering on her a moment too long. "Care for another drink?" He gestured to the vodka bottle, an unspoken invitation, a subtle pressure that April felt acutely. Numbed by fear and the small amount of alcohol she had already consumed, she nodded, a silent, almost involuntary acceptance. As Tim poured her another glass, a chilling realization dawned on April. The polite facade, the casual pleasantries, had dissolved. The room, once merely impersonal, now felt like a cage. She was alone, isolated, with a man whose true intentions were beginning to surface, menacing and predatory. The air crackled with a silent, terrifying tension. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She was cornered, trapped. The situation, already dire, was about to descend into a nightmare far darker than anything she could have imagined. The shadows in the room seemed to lengthen, to twist into grotesque shapes, mirroring the terror that was now consuming April. The cheerful autumn morning in Emmerdale felt like a lifetime ago, a distant memory of innocence irrevocably shattered. While April's world spiraled into a terrifying abyss, another dramatic chapter was poised to unfold for Ruby Milligan, a woman whose tumultuous past continued to cast a long shadow over her present. Emmerdale fans, reeling from the recent revelations and escalating dangers, were offered a glimmer of a different kind of drama, a hint of festive chaos, courtesy of star Beth Cordingley. Beth, with a mischievous glint in her eye, hinted at what Christmas in Emmerdale would bring for Ruby, promising a mix of light-hearted moments and impending trouble. It had been an undeniably tough year for Ruby. Her storyline had plunged into the harrowing depths of teenage trauma, revisiting the abuse she suffered at the hands of her father, Anthony, a man she had ultimately killed in a shocking whodunit twist. The weight of that secret, shared with the Dingle clan, had been a crushing burden. And just when a semblance of peace seemed within reach, the sinister John had emerged, unearthing Anthony's buried body and using the grim knowledge to blackmail Caleb. Ruby's journey, raw with pain and resilience, had resonated deeply with audiences, and Beth Cordingley's gripping portrayal had justly earned her a nomination for Best Actress at the Inside Soap Awards. Speaking to reporters at the awards event, Beth, however, promised a much-needed dose of festive cheer for her troubled character. "We've just started filming the Christmas episodes," Beth revealed, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "Ruby's got a fun storyline coming up that I think the viewers will really enjoy. It includes a bit of Manpreet, Caleb getting wound up, and Ruby trying to wriggle her way out of a sticky situation." The mention of Manpreet Sharma immediately brought to mind Ruby's recent on-screen clashes with the Doctor, confrontations that had become instant fan favorites for their comedic brilliance. Their fiery arguments, culminating in both women landing in police custody, had provided much-needed comic relief amidst the village's darker narratives. It was within the sterile confines of the police station that a surprising détente had been reached. Ruby, shedding her usual guardedness, had opened up to Manpreet about her painful past, her traumatic experiences as a teenager, and the immense burden she carried. Those heartfelt moments had forged an unexpected bond, a fragile but genuine friendship born from shared vulnerability. Now, with the hatchet buried, Beth Cordingley enthusiastically shared that fans could anticipate much more from this unlikely pairing. "You'll definitely be seeing more of Ruby and Manpreet together. We're pals now," Beth laughed, a warmth in her voice. "I absolutely loved filming those scenes with Rebecca Sarkar, who plays Manpreet, and Laura Norton, who plays Carrie, is just a fantastic comic actress." Beth's enthusiasm was infectious as she painted a vivid picture of Ruby's impending Christmas misadventures. "I wanted Ruby to turn up at the depot in a hard hat and high-vis jacket, completely clueless about what she's supposed to be doing," Beth added with a grin, a playful hint at the comedic chaos that awaited viewers. The image of Ruby, out of her depth and adorably bewildered in a setting far removed from her usual glamorous facade, was instantly appealing. This festive period promised a welcome respite for Ruby, a chance to navigate lighter, if still comically challenging, waters, and to solidify her surprising friendship with Manpreet. But even amidst the promise of cheer, Emmerdale's residents knew that peace was often a fleeting illusion, and trouble, in its myriad forms, was never far behind. For even more behind-the-scenes gossip from Beth, including what lies ahead for Ruby and Caleb, viewers were urged to check out the next issue of Inside Soap on sale Tuesday, October 14th. As the village grappled with its interwoven dramas, a new, harrowing storyline had erupted, centered on the lives of Carl Holliday and Clemmy Reed. The brutal truth behind Lucas's attack on Carl at school had finally clawed its way to the surface, leaving a trail of shockwaves and devastation in its wake. Earlier in the week, Nicola King and Dawn Fletcher had been summoned to the school, their mother's instinct screaming as Lucas, Clemmy's half-brother, had been caught physically assaulting Carl. Dawn, utterly stunned that her own son could lash out so violently at Nicola's boy, immediately set about trying to uncover the root cause of such an aggressive outburst. Her heart ached with a mother's concern, a desperate need to understand and to rectify. But when she gently encouraged Lucas to apologize, he stubbornly refused, his young face etched with an unyielding defiance that baffled and worried her. Now, on this October 10th, the devastating reason behind the altercation had finally been laid bare, sending seismic shockwaves through both the King and Fletcher families. The police, their presence a chilling harbinger of official consequences, had arrived in the village. They had sought out Clemmy and Carl, their calm, professional demeanor doing little to soften the horrifying news they delivered to a bewildered and increasingly distraught Nicola. "We have received information that Carl Holliday has been in possession of and distributed an indecent image of a child," one officer stated, his voice devoid of emotion, the words hanging heavy and suffocating in the air. Nicola's world tilted on its axis, her mind refusing to comprehend the gravity of the accusation. At Home Farm, the police delivered the equally devastating details to Dawn, revealing that Clemmy herself had taken and sent an inappropriate image to Carl, which he had then shockingly shared in a group chat. The officers explained, with a grim clarity, that because Clemmy was under the age of consent, it was an offense for her to take or distribute such an image, even of herself. Both families were left reeling, their lives irrevocably altered by the shocking revelation. Nicola and Jimmy, fiercely protective of their son, had vehemently insisted that Carl would never engage in something so serious, so morally reprehensible. Their denial was a shield against the unthinkable, a desperate attempt to cling to the image of their innocent son. But then, Carl, his voice barely a whisper, broken and shamed, finally confessed. "I did it," he admitted quietly, the words a raw wound. "I sent the picture of Clemmy," he insisted, however, with a flicker of desperate hope, that he hadn't asked her to take it, a subtle plea for mitigation that offered little solace to his heartbroken parents. Desperate to shield her son from the devastating consequences that now loomed, Nicola had tried to persuade Dawn to drop the matter, to somehow make this nightmare disappear. But Dawn, her own heart aching with a mixture of anger, sorrow, and a fierce commitment to justice, refused. I just want to do things properly, okay? She told Nicola, her voice firm, unwavering. Carl needs to take responsibility for what he's done. Her words, though painful, were born of a deep-seated belief in accountability, even when it involved someone she cared for, even when it involved a child caught in a devastating mistake. Later, the police confirmed their unwavering commitment to the investigation. They informed the distraught families that Carl would be formally interviewed under caution at the station the following day. Nicola, her face streaked with tears, her voice raw with anguish, begged the officers not to ruin his life before it had even begun. Her plea, a mother's desperate cry, hung heavy in the air, a testament to the profound despair that had descended upon the King household. Looking ahead to next week's episodes, the turmoil promised to intensify. Nicola and Jimmy would be thrown into a vortex of fear and uncertainty as Carl was formally taken into police custody, the stark reality of legal consequences crashing down upon their family. Meanwhile, the already strained tensions between the Tate and King families would escalate further, threatening to explode as Nicola and Dawn's fragile truce shattered, giving way to another fierce, emotionally charged argument. The harrowing truth had been revealed, but its bitter consequences were only just beginning to unfold, threatening to tear apart the fabric of these closely intertwined lives. Emmerdale continued weeknights at 7:30 p.m. on ITV1 with episodes also available to stream on ITVX. The morning of October 13th dawned grey and unforgiving, mirroring the desolation in April Windsor's heart. The horrifying encounter in the hotel room had left an indelible stain on her soul, a chilling imprint of vulnerability and terror. She had escaped, physically unharmed, but the psychological wounds were deep, festering. The image of Tim, his predatory gaze, his subtle yet undeniable pressure, was seared into her memory. Ray had been waiting for her, a chillingly blank expression on his face as she stumbled out of the hotel, her clothes rumpled, her eyes wide with a trauma she couldn't articulate. He hadn't asked questions, hadn't offered comfort, only a cold, assessing look that made her feel even more like a pawn, a used tool in his horrifying game. The drive back to Emmerdale was a blur of silence and suppressed sobs. April clung to the window, the passing scenery a meaningless jumble, her mind replaying the terrifying minutes in room 302. She felt dirty, violated, even though no physical harm had been done. The emotional manipulation, the sheer terror of being trapped, had stripped her of a part of herself she didn't know how to reclaim. How could she tell anyone? Who would believe her? The shame, a heavy shroud, began to settle around her shoulders, suffocating her with its insidious tendrils. Back in the village, the familiar sights and sounds offered no solace. The Dingle home, usually a sanctuary of boisterous life and unconditional love, felt alien, a place she was no longer worthy of. She slipped into the house, unnoticed by anyone but Samson, whose innocent, questioning gaze made her flinch. She needed to be alone, to process the unspeakable, to try and mend the shattered fragments of her courage. But silence was a dangerous companion, and in the quiet solitude of her room, the memories replayed with a vivid, relentless cruelty.